Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second day of the conference. We have a great panel here for you today. My name is Jackie Mole. I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan and the student lead for the Finding the Digital Fan panel. We have a great group of panelists today. Starting from the left, we have Amy Brooks, the Executive Vice President of Team Marketing and Business Operations for the MBA. Brian Cusack, Industry Director and Business Lead for the Google Boston campus from Google. We have John Forsey from Ticketmaster. And we have Jennifer Van Dyke from the Wasserman Media Group. And Mike Darrison from LinkedIn. If you'd like to ask any questions, please go on the app in order to use the Q&A section for the Finding the Digital Fan panel. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ben Shields, our moderator from the MIT Sloan School. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for getting up bright and early to be with us today. And thank you to our distinguished group of panelists for being here to have a very interesting discussion about finding the digital fan. The key question that is going to be driving our conversation today is how teams and organizations are using big data tools to drive more revenue. It is an interesting question. I'm not sure it's as controversial as the social media question du jour of whether the dress is gold and white or black and blue, but we'll see how these questions go here with our panelists.
I was gold and white.
You're going gold and white?
Yeah.
Okay, your team gold and white? Okay, fair.
Black and blue.
Okay.
All right, so we got a little controversy here.
Too ugly to wear.
But let's get right to the heart of the matter. I wanted to start off with Amy and get a sense from your perspective at the NBA, how you are looking at big data tools to drive revenue for your organization and the teams.
Sure. So, you know, when you talk about finding the digital fan, we're very fortunate as a league that we have a lot of fans globally. There's over 800 million people who either like or follow our league, our teams, or our players. But when it comes to monetizing that, it's obviously a harder question. For those of you who heard Adam Silver speak yesterday, he talked about how globally, almost 100% of our fans will never go to a game, but yet those who go to our games drive about a third of our revenue today. And so we're obviously focused on selling tickets, we're focused on selling suites, and we're focused on sponsorships as well. And we have a lot of our partners here on this panel that help us do that today. And it's becoming a much more analytical process in terms of finding them. And I'm sure that's what we're going to talk about. But in terms of reaching them via social media, reaching them via digital ad spending, and we have a lot of analytics tools that we're trying to be more and more efficient and effective in terms of finding them.
Absolutely. And that, John, I want to get to you, and from your perspective, how are you trying to help teams use big data to more effectively drive revenue?
Sure. So I oversee the data and analytics at Ticketmaster, and for us, it is all about giving the clients this 360-degree view of the fan, and increasingly, it's about how to then inject that knowledge into digital advertising and marketing. So we're really trying to solve two problems, and digital is very good at both of those. One is awareness, just helping fans know, hey, my favorite team is coming to town against the home team, or this event is going to be occurring. We have a stat we talk a lot about. There's 40% of tickets go unsold across all live events. That's a lot of money being left on the table of a perishable good. And when you survey people, there are a lot of events where there's so many events going on, you can't keep track of all of them. Pro sports is not as bad on the awareness side as most live events, but that's a big push for us. So awareness, using digital channels to do that awareness, and then closing the ticket sale itself with very effective digital channels. Search engine marketing sells a lot of tickets for the teams. We try to make sure that the right terms are being bought and helping them with that. Display retargeting, both display ads and social ads, and even old school email are all digital channels. They're all measurable, and you can optimize all those channels. So it becomes a very powerful tool for the teams, and very important if you do it right, because you can be relevant, knowing the fan with the message to put in front of the fan.
So John, your focus is largely on ticket sales. I want to turn now to Jennifer, who also helps teams and organizations use big data to drive revenue in other ways. Can you talk a little bit about your experience?
Absolutely. So at Wasserman, we have the privilege of working with athletes, teams and properties as well as brands spending in that space. So the opportunity to learn from all of them and cross-pollinate then the opportunities back. And I think what we find so interesting is that definitely next to religion, sports is probably the largest aggregator of people, right, in a time and place. And when you can aggregate them, you can know them and you can monetize them. And nothing gives you that ability better than digital. And I think the interesting things about what leagues have done, and especially very advanced leagues like the NBA, is that they're starting to now add layers into that aggregation and use that on the local level. The challenge, frankly, for teams is that maybe 10 to 15% of their digital audience actually lives in their market. So to Amy's point, when that in-market fan is driving a third of the revenue, it opens up a whole other round of opportunities for teams to look at how do they reach those digital fans outside of the market, and they need to do that in partnership with leagues.
Yeah, it's an interesting advantage of digital, broadening the scope of the fans that you can reach. Let's kind of talk a little bit about the social media perspective and turn it over to Mike. How do you think from a LinkedIn point of view, you're helping teams drive more revenue through big data?
Sure. So I think first I would distinguish between a B2C sale and a B2B, right? So if you're selling individual tickets, clearly a B2C. But when you think about teams selling suites, selling sponsorships, that's a B2B sale. And when we think about that, marketers, a lot of people think, well, if I'm going to generate revenue, it's largely our marketing team's going to generate the leads. And that's super important, but only about 30% on average of leads are generated from marketing. So what do the reps, the sales folks, what do they do? Because they have to go find the other 70% of the revenue. And that's where social media can come in, and particularly for B2B, and if you think of LinkedIn as the world's largest professional network, this is precisely what LinkedIn's great at. And so when we think about selling into an organization, one of the most important things is how do you find and map out the right people in an organization? And so, for example, Gartner says that there are 7 people that are influential in a B2B decision. So let's say you're trying to sell a suite, you're trying to sell sponsorships. You may have a great relationship with one individual, say it's the head of marketing of that account, but you know what, the head of sales may get involved, the head of finance, it could be a whole spectrum. And that's where social media, particularly in this case for B2B, LinkedIn, can help you map out that organization, try to understand who the key influencers are, and essentially do what we call social selling. And social selling is becoming increasingly more mainstream. And we'll talk more about how we measure that a little later.
Okay. Now, Brian, from a Google standpoint, how are you looking at this question a little bit differently from potentially our other panelists?
Sure. So there's a couple things going back to the start of the conversation. What we see with partners across all industry segments, and the same would be true in sports, is data is what's the right data to look at, and we generally find that data is siloed within particularly large organizations. And so the ability to actually use the data to make good business decisions gets very clouded and confused. If you think about the pipe between the customer and the eventual transaction and then the relationship after the transaction, there's a lot of friction in the pipe, okay? There's different data sets, there's different data collection areas, and we see the most successful enterprises being the ones that can eliminate those friction points and those different data sets along the way and eventually get themselves to a single view of the customer concept. And most marketers, and that's what we all are here today, do not have a single view of the customer. They have multiple views of the customer. So when you look at your data gathering capabilities, but then your data analysis capabilities, you have to start to try to eliminate those friction points and figure out how do you actually get a single point of view. So there's one key point. Yeah. Second key point is the online ticket buyer is actually what are the real value points between where are the real value and touch points between you and a customer? So the average online ticket buyer has 5 digital actions between the time they think about buying a ticket and the time that they actually buy a ticket. Each one of those touch points, and it will happen on anywhere from 3 to 5 different sites. So it could happen on your team site. It could happen on a ticket selling site. It could happen on a social site. There's all different touch points. Yet, all of those touch points aren't necessarily gathered or understood, and they're not valued appropriately. So when you eventually make a media buying decision to capture customers or to generate engagement and then convert a customer, marketers are not understanding that there's value at each touch point, and as a result, they are not investing or weighting their investments appropriately for those touch points. So we're obviously big on data at Google. We have a lot of it. So we think a lot about this. There's no silver bullets, right? So I can't, if I mention the 5 touch points, I'm not certain that we could tell you, touch point A is worth 5% of your budget, and touch point E, if that's 5, E is worth 30% of your budget. You have to figure that out yourself over time based on the eventual lifetime value of the customer, things like that. But it's really a process that most institutions or marketing organizations talk about, but really don't invest serious time in making clear decisions around.
Well, let's build on what you just said there, and I want to direct this question to John, and let's get into the attribution models.
Sure.
I mean, it's all well and good that teams and organizations are moving into the big data space to drive more revenue, but how are you able to show them that what they're doing is working? This is an analytics conference after all, so
Right.
Share a little bit about your thinking with attribution models.
In many ways, that's our biggest challenge is the beauty of all these digital channels versus the offline channels, and broadcast is they're measurable. The flip side of the challenge is that you can have this false precision. So you can collect all the touch point measurements and you can try to ascribe a value to each of the channels, but then you can get into some religious discussions as to how to weight each channel. Okay, is last touch worth 50% of the attribution, or is first touch, because that's where the initial awareness happened, should that get 50%? And I would say, honestly, it's very early days. Right now, when we're working with clients, the key for us is just to be completely transparent. Here's how we're going to measure things. It's not a perfect measurement, but we will tell you how it works and we'll be consistent until we improve to a better measure. And in some cases, that means you measure the channel in a silo and you miss all the multi-touch attributes. In other cases, it means that you go across, you put a regression model on top of all the touches, and it gives you exactly 20 and 40% and 15% across them all. The other thing I would say on attribution is that mobile is making it very hard, but I think ultimately will make it actually better. So right now, if you do a bunch of touch points on mobile and then the person goes on to a desktop website to buy the ticket just because it's more convenient, you may not have realized you had any of those other touch points because the identity between the two devices is not there. So that has been, as mobile traffic, more than half of our traffic at Ticketmaster is now mobile or tablet. That has made the attribution models challenged right now. The flip side is, I think companies, some of which are up here, that have ubiquitous apps are going to solve identity because you're logged in on your phone, you're logged in on your desktop, and they now know that those two devices are the same person. Right. And that solving of identity will be like a step function improvement in all of these models.
Just to add to that, excuse my voice today, one of the things we're focused on is the digital optimization of how our teams approach the digital fan. We had someone from the Obama campaign this week come and speak at our team analytics workshop, and one of the things he spoke about is the importance of testing during that campaign, and the number of tests that they ran, because they just bombarded people with fundraising messages, et cetera, but the number of tests they ran, A to Z testing on email subject lines, et cetera, et cetera. We're trying to do the same thing in partnership with Google, with Ticketmaster, for a lot of our team websites in terms of how do people engage their fans in order to not only view content, but also buy a ticket. And so testing is the most important of it. Is it find tickets versus buy tickets? But it's a 1,000 different iterations of that. And it's really important when the people, you guys all know, you're bombarded by messaging that has to be in the optimal way at the optimal time in order to really convert the fan.
And I think there are, if
please,
I can
Jennifer.
jump in, I mean, we also encourage that you test. Like, gone are the days of you launch a program at the start of a season and you measure it at the end of the season. You're kind of dead in the water if that's the approach. But the testing through there can be also little social front-end things too. Like we've seen huge increases when teams post a win photo versus when they post a win photo with a ticket link to the next game. And it's real money being left on the table through social today even, but starting to get more consistent growth.
I don't like the word test.
No?
I don't like the word test at all.
And why is that, Brian?
Well, at the outset, it essentially it supposes that something's going to be right or something's going to be wrong, something's going to be good, something's going to be bad. I think that the word and I know this sounds very simple, but I think it gets a mindset that we're trying something, it didn't work, we're not going back. Okay, so I think there are judgments and finalities around the word test that start to become institutionalized. And instead, if you use words like optimize or iterate, there's actually institutional behaviors that can be adjusted, because as fast as everything changes, something that's not right, that's not fully optimized today, could be really effective tomorrow. And so I think, and we see it all the time where customers, I tried it, it didn't work, we're done. Wrong, okay? Things are different today.
And I'm going to adapt my language because I do agree with you, because
My job is done.
What our guy from the Obama campaign was saying is they would test these 10 subject lines and how they worked, and obviously some worked better than others, and they could then correlate it to a revenue difference. And a lot of times you would just go with that and just use that same subject line forever.
Yeah.
They would then test different subject lines the next day and find different results. And it's the optimization of that and the iteration that I think is important. And so we're trying to emphasize not just A/B testing, but I was saying A to Z, but I'm going to A to Z optimization is better.
Iteration.
Mike, I've got a two-part question. Or go ahead, John.
Just real quick, because we were talking about this before the panel, but I think one of the scarcest and most important skill sets right now is being someone who's an expert in Omniture or Google Analytics. If you are fluent in those tools, you will not have trouble finding a job anytime soon. It is really becoming the lifeblood of most teams, organizations, just knowing where the traffic's coming from. So a bit of a plug, just because we're always trying to look for these people ourselves. It's only going to become more complicated and more important to be able to measure that stuff.
Terrific advice. So, Mike, two-part question. Do you believe in the word test? But second, and most importantly, talk us through how LinkedIn is thinking about attribution models for its clients.
Sure. So I think I'll be a convert too. I like the idea of optimization, iteration over the word test. I mean, at LinkedIn, we have hundreds of A/B optimizations going at any moment. So thank you for bringing that to us. The multiple ways that we would do attribution. If you think though about back to the case of the sales rep who's driving most of the revenue, how do you measure how effective they are with big data, in this case social media? So one thing that we did to try to help with that is we came up with the LinkedIn Social Selling Index. And essentially what it is it measures every sales rep, how well they're embracing social media, social selling specifically. And so every rep has a score we have from 1 to 100. And then we can aggregate that and do it by, in this case, by teams, by regions. We can slice and dice it by industry, et cetera. And just to kind of break it down for you, it's composed of 4 components. So the first piece is to build a professional profile. So a lot of mistakes that sales reps will make is they'll look at LinkedIn, for example, as their resume. And it's true, LinkedIn helps people find their dream jobs, but far more traffic is coming to their profile for customers, partners, and so on. And so if you think about it, does your customer want to see that you're a quota crusher, which is something that you might put on a resume? So we look at that, and also you can now embed multimedia and a whole bunch of great content on your profile. It essentially becomes like your mini marketing website. So that's one. Number 2 is finding the right people. And that's something I just spoke about a few minutes ago. Mapping out the organization. Are you doing searches? Are you figuring out who the right people to talk to are? Third piece is engaging with insights. So are you getting informed? Are you getting signals from social media? Did someone recently get promoted? Did someone new come into the company that you're prospecting to? And are you also contributing back content back to the ecosystem and being a part of the conversation? And for that last piece, it's not necessarily, a lot of people think that's like writing a lot of content and it's very time consuming. A lot of it's just reading and quickly commenting and liking and essentially curating what's already in your newsfeed and sharing great content back to the market. And then the fourth piece is around building trust, building relationships, and that goes into this whole notion of warm introductions, which is huge. Buyers hate to be cold called. So, when you're selling suites, you're selling sponsorships, et cetera, cold calls are increasingly harder and harder. So how do you leverage your network, your company's network, and do it at scale? And so each of those four comprise about 25 points. You get the score of 100, and what's exciting is we saw the social selling index tech was way out ahead. So over the last few years, as you'd expect, tech companies, but what's happening is a lot of the other industries are starting to catch up. And for example, some of the professional sports leagues are starting to really get it. And actually the NBA is really grown amazingly in this area. I think we're 4th out of 6th of professional leagues as of about 2-3 years ago. And they're now number 1 by far. They've really gone behind social selling. I don't know if you had any.
Yeah, no, I'll add to that. We have definitely drank a lot of the LinkedIn Kool-Aid, I would say. And it started with, we started hearing our teams, they would have sales reps who were purchasing LinkedIn Premium with their own money out of their own pocket. And we said, there must be something here. And we started hearing these success stories. I talked about our 800 million likes and followers on social media. That doesn't include is it 350 million people that, is that right?
347.
347, sorry. Ballpark on LinkedIn. So we now have almost every team in all 3 leagues, we have 60 teams, using LinkedIn Sales Navigator products to find these fans. And you think about how hard it is to find a fan. We talked about selling tickets on Facebook, Twitter, other forms of social media. On LinkedIn, you know a lot more about this fan right away. And it's not just, it's great for sponsorships, obviously B2B, but in terms of finding premium ticket buyers and also group sales. If you look on LinkedIn for basketball coaches, cheer camp instructors, choir leaders, our teams are finding tremendous success. And we're using the SSI, the social selling index, and we're in the early stages of the analytics behind it. But when you map that to sales rep performance, what we're seeing at teams that have adopted this, like the Sacramento Kings, Minnesota Timberwolves, and we have a lot of other teams that are really leading the charge here, they're seeing their top sales reps also have the highest SSI. So we think there's a lot here in terms of transforming how we sell. We still have reps on the phone, but if they are using LinkedIn, it's integrated into CRM, it's a much warmer discussion and just a hugely powerful tool.
Yeah, very fascinating evolution of the LinkedIn platform. Amy, I do want to stay with you for a minute because I want to change the discussion to talk a little bit about content and how teams and organizations are creating original content to attract, engage, and retain fans that can ultimately lead to more revenue.
Yep.
So talk about it from the NBA's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, content is king, like they say, and sports content is fantastically powerful. And I'll just give you an example that's fresh in my mind. We just came off our All-Star weekend. We had 150 million video views across YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Vine, just from our NBA on TNT, and NBA TV accounts. And the power of our teams creating this content is something that they're focused on. And here in Boston, the Celtics are one of the teams at the forefront of this. They've hired people to produce and curate custom content and put it out on their app, put it on their social media channels. You heard Adam speak yesterday about the notion of a backstage pass. That's what fans want to see. Obviously, our highlights are our premium content, but fans want to see what our players do, what coaches are saying. And we're able to bring a lot of that content in unique ways. And if you do it right, and Jen can talk a lot about this, we're then able to monetize it by integrating our partners in authentic ways into that content.
Jennifer, can you build on that?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And that's exactly what partners are looking for, are those types of deeper experiential opportunities. while they're shifting media dollars into digital, the optimal goal is not to shift that into banner impressions. The goal is to shift that into more immersive experiences. Content is perfect for that. It gives fans a benefit. It gives the brand an authentic way to tie in, especially if you're a brand that has something to do with that behind-the-scenes world, for example. There's a lot of focus on pre-game meals now, right? Well, that opens a whole row of food and beverage potential partnership natural extensions. And really, there's no limit except creativity into how you can look to take advantage of that as a team and as a brand. I think the other thing too is that, you know, what we see today and end up counseling most of our clients on is the importance of a content strategy. And that's from a team side as well as from a brand and partner side. And the NBA's rules with teams are evolving to the place where there's really significant brand opportunities there. And we don't measure them anymore based on impressions alone. We're measuring based on engagement and how much people are actually watching, taking actions. We're really measuring the impact, not the effort, right? That impressions measure.
Right.
So what digital's created an entirely new view of content in many ways. And what historically, if you think about most content, I think the way we're talking about it up here, which is primarily video, there used to be video ads and video content. Those lines are completely blurred right now as a result of what digital has done in terms of accessibility and the pervasiveness of video as a platform. So in many cases, I see the definition or the line between advertising and content disappearing, and it can be done really, really well from a creative perspective if you keep words like authenticity in mind. I think there's something else that's very interesting about video and the words like engagement or impressions. You know, video primarily, you think about sight, sound, and motion, emotion, right? Making a connection between a brand or a person and a consumer. And it's really possible now to have a lot of your video assets become both engagement assets and conversion assets if you use them properly. But then you get back to the whole attribution discussion again, which is what are you really trying to measure and how are you really weighting the success of this? But digital video has changed the game as it relates to content, particularly video content, and that's why the whole, you know, having a tops-down strategy about you can't think about video as being, it has to be platform agnostic in many ways.
Absolutely.
In today's world. And that's all been driven by what digital has done to video.
Well, and by the way, your measurement model has to be cross-platform as well.
Yeah.
Because we see a lot of teams across a lot of sports that say, well, you know, here's the video views I got on my website, and oh yeah, we did this on YouTube too. Well, Facebook native video in the last 8 months is returning for sports teams 4 or 5x the views on other platforms. If we're not counting those impressions and those engagements that are being delivered through social, we're missing almost 50% of the story these days. So the models need to evolve too.
I was just going to add the future being not just video today, but the interactive video of the future.
Right.
When we were at Google headquarters this month, just looking at Oculus and virtual reality and the future of us being able to engage our fan globally, and Adam spoke about this yesterday, by putting the fan courtside. And we see so much potential in these new technologies to do that, and that'll be here soon as well. And the notion of incorporating partners into that, again, in an authentic way is very appealing.
Well, and to that end, I'll just add one colorful example in virtual reality. So our partner Verizon has now done 2 VR installations, one at Indy 500 and one at the recent NFL Super Bowl, that leveraged Oculus Rift tied to real motion platforms. So in the one, you felt like you were driving around behind Michael Andretti around an Indy 500 lap, and the other one, you actually felt like you were a punt returner returning a kick. And you were on a little platform, so you felt like you were running a bit. And that was the centerpiece of Verizon's Super Bowl activation on site. So brands are aggressively moving into this space, and they will oftentimes push teams into doing some of that.
And it sounds like it could be good for fans as well.
No doubt.
Mike, from LinkedIn's perspective, how are you all thinking about content?
So I think from a monetization perspective, I want to highlight two big trends. And you know, we just talked about one, the blurring of content for advertising and content that's not really about specifically selling a product. So this whole phenomenon is called content marketing. And if you think about it, it's come at a huge time, not just for social media, but for all digital properties, because we're increasingly moving to a mobile world, and the form factor is smaller, display ad units are increasingly harder. So if you look at companies like Facebook, Twitter, a lot of why they're doing so well with monetization is they've figured out how to do what's called native advertising, essentially sponsored content in the newsfeed. There's a piece of content that, again, the lines are blurring, and it's informational, it's educational, it's not specifically necessarily about selling a product, and that's just taken off in a big way, and at LinkedIn as well. Our business called Marketing Solutions that has sponsored content has grown the fastest of all of our businesses in the last few years. So that's a big, big trend, and again, a lot of it's driven by mobile and the smaller form factor. The second one that is important to think about from content, and dovetail off John, you talked about having omniture analytics. Another area of expertise that's super valuable is around marketing automation, because this is essentially how you're capturing the full funnel of a lot of things. So let me just take a step back and describe a little bit of what marketing automation is. Historically, marketing automation is companies like Eloqua, Marketo, HubSpot, where they'll take an email, so you have a website or some way to capture someone's information, typically email, and then you have a different set of content that you send typically over email that changes based on who the persona is or where they are in the buying cycle. And so you're seeing a lot of marketing teams pull together a whole bunch of content and then distribute it through, typically through email marketing automation based on the different customer, the prospect. What we're really excited about is, for example, is we want to take marketing automation beyond just email. So LinkedIn, we did our largest acquisition to date called Bizzo about a year ago. And what Bizzo does is, instead of, what do you do if you don't have an email address of someone you want to use your content and nurture them across the web? And so essentially, if you think about your website, most of your website's anonymous visitors. Only 5% of a visitor is going to fill out a lead form and give you their email. So how do you do marketing automation, for example, to the other 95%? And so that's where Bizzo comes in. And now with LinkedIn, so we can essentially aggregate audiences. And so, for example, in the world of sports, if you're trying to find senior decision makers at various companies, you can essentially see who went to your homepage or who went deep into the ticket section. If they were just browsing on the homepage, probably a fan, you'd have a different set of content that would nurture them across the web and on LinkedIn. If they went deep, then they're further along in the funnel, and you'd have different content that's potentially more specific around season tickets and boxes, for example.
So lots of great things that we're discussing. The future is obviously very, very bright. Lots of positives. I'm looking forward to it. But there are drawbacks. There are unintended consequences. There are challenges as it relates to big data technology and using it to drive revenue. So I wanted to get a sense from our panelists, what are some of the drawbacks or challenges that you're facing today in this area?
And I could start. We have a real focus on aggregating fan data, obviously, and understanding as much as we can about our fans, especially those who are coming to our game. We want to understand who's sitting in every seat. We want to understand when you come to the game. We want to understand what you buy at the game, when you buy it. Mm-hmm. And there's data challenges to getting all of that. Mm-hmm. And from a fan perspective, we want to make sure that we use that data in the most appropriate way. Yeah. And just one example, in terms of servicing a season ticket member at a game, if that person goes and buys a Bud Light in the second quarter every game, wouldn't it be nice if your service rep brought you that Bud Light at the end of the first quarter? And then, does a fan find that creepy, or does a fan find that nice? Right. We hope the fan would find that nice. But that's an example. Once we are able to get that data and really understand our fans, we just have to use it in the right ways that are going to be most fan-friendly.
Yeah. John, did you have something?
Yeah, for us, I think it's a few things. One is there has to be a reason why you're asking for the information. So you have to explain the just full transparency as to what are you collecting, why are you collecting it, what is in it for the fan. And then The flip side is that you have to then sort of honor that, and when you do interact or communicate, you do it with relevance or you add value to their experience. If you follow those two rules and you make it very clear that fans can opt out or they can sort of wipe the slate clean, you can stay in a good place. The good thing about sports is it's a, maybe I'll get in trouble saying this, it's a safer industry than, say, medicine, stuff like that, where generally it's about getting them a relevant sports event in front of them with it comes through. So for us, I think if you can't tie it to relevance, then you're going to start to get into people wondering, why are they asking for all this stuff and I'm getting spammed.
Right. Any drawbacks or challenges that, Brian, you may be facing?
I go back to one of my first points, which is the risk of too many data siloed and large amounts of data siloed in too many places, and as each silo gets more established, the harder it gets to eventually integrate all the data across an organization. So having a data strategy from the beginning that's geared towards identifying a single view of a customer is critical, right? I think that's the biggest risk. I think, the issues of authenticity and creepiness, you work your way through those. And we always have been, right? That's nothing new.
Yeah.
But I think the sheer amount of data that we're gathering right now presents the greatest risk in terms of how we manage it.
Yeah, and I think that dovetails nicely with what Amy was talking about.
We're very focused on this 360-degree view, because you're right. If you have a silo of data that you're not including, it might be very important.
Right. I mean, you have your web analytics, you have your billing data, you have your front-end acquisition data sets. If they're not integrated, then you're just not setting yourself up for true success.
Jennifer?
The other challenge I would add too, especially in our work with teams, is really changing the mindset. Like becoming the marketing organization that we've all talked about up here today for any professional sports team really does require a mind shift and a lot of understanding of what this means, not just the systems we need, but how we put it together, and really give a lot of credit to teams that have made the investment in that, not just from a financial perspective, but from an organizational perspective, and willing to look at where does this fit best, how does this work for the long term over my organization. And the Orlando Magic, the Boston Celtics, a number of NBA teams are very aggressive in doing that, and they aren't necessarily the teams that live in markets like Golden State where you would kind of expect it from them, right? And that I think is going to set them on a course along with the tool sets for good things down the road. But today it's a challenge because it's so uneven.
Indeed. Mike, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the perspective of, again, how do sales reps engage in this world that could be a drawback is that, a lot of salesmen, I talked a little bit about it before, are playing a volume game. Did I make 100 cold calls today? Did I send 100 emails in this just volume game? And if you bring that to social media, it'll backfire. It's because your persona is embedded there with your network, and you don't want to be screaming essentially, buy my product, and start applying that kind of mentality, because what else is happening is your buyers today are far more informed. They're about 70% of the way through a buying journey before a sales rep contacts them typically. And so they know a lot about you typically and a lot about your solutions. And so now that all this information about them is increasingly in their company is online, to do the old school mentality of, tell me a little about what you do, what are some of the problems you're facing when all that stuff is now online and in social, can backfire in a big way.
So we have a lot of great questions from our audience, and in true social media fashion, they have been submitted through Pigeonhole, and the ones with the most votes are going to be the ones that are asked. So I'm going to try to get to as many as we can. The first one, coming in at 9 votes. When a team is bad...
Is that the most?
That is the most.
Okay.
That is the most. When a team is bad, social can become a pretty negative place. How do teams adjust social strategy when they are having a bad season?
I don't know if they radically adjust it. Obviously, there's less content posted about our win last night, but there's always great stories. And some of those stories may be off the court that the team is doing in the community, because our teams are truly community assets, whether they win or lose.
Right.
So you might see some of the content a little more off the court versus on the court, but regardless, we have we have so many games. They're going to win. They're going to have highlights. They're going to have great player stories. So there's one of the great things about our game. There's always good content, whether you win or you lose.
So
Right.
here's, again, what digital has done to the relationship between brand and consumer. And this has been going on for, I'd say, aggressively for about 8 years. And that is, consumers are going to talk about your brand no matter what, good, bad, or other. So deal with it, okay? They're going to talk about your brand. So what you have to start to do is start to convert your thinking from, I'm not a brand, I'm a member of the community, right? So if you're having a bad season, you can't run away from it. They're going to talk about it. So provide the good highlights when they happen, provide the positive people stories when they happen, but be honest. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to prescribe a actual dialogue here, but they're going to talk about it. You can't run away from it. Be a member of the community. Just accept that.
And I think our approach too with teams in particular is that regardless of what you're doing on the court, your social and digital presence really should be about the team's personality and ethos. Teams have storylines that change every season, no matter what. I grew up in Cleveland. I understand this challenge, and I also understand the challenge of not winning and suffering through. And fans want that no matter what. They want that access and that content because you're still fans. And so, you know, look at the Atlanta Hawks, for example. The Atlanta Hawks have taken a very unique approach to their social. It may not be everyone's flavor, but it's very unique to them, and they're working it. And it's working for them. And they've obviously went from a team that didn't have a lot to put on the court to now doing a lot on the court.
And they've put a lot of analytics behind segmentation. And millennials is a key target for them. And so you see things like swipe right night on Tinder. So that won't work in every market.
But have fun with it.
I have some good news. We have a new leading vote getter for questions at 16 votes. Is social media better served to drive traffic/ad revenue or build a brand presence/voice? The two seem at odds with each other.
So the question was, repeat the question?
Sure. Is social media better served to drive traffic and ad revenue or build a brand presence or voice? Okay, they seem to be at odds. So help reconcile.
Yeah, I think that's a false choice. I mean, I think, again, the more you have great content, whether it's for ads or not, you're going to attract more and more traffic. You're going to attract more engagement, and then naturally that will flow to revenue. I think, you know, parsing them out, I'd be curious who asked the question. Why you think it's they're at odds with each other?
Agreed.
Okay. Next question is for you, Amy, specifically.
Okay.
For Amy, what is the most important social channel for the NBA? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, etc.
Putting me on the spot.
Throw YouTube in there
No
too as a
kidding.
social channel.
No kidding. Everyone's going to guess I'm going to say this, but they are all important. And I would add LinkedIn too.
Yeah.
You know, we have likes and followers across all these channels. They all are unique in who they reach, how they reach them, and the aggregate of it, and we try to adopt new social channels and test all the time. We just want to be where our fans are and reach them in authentic ways. So we were out in Silicon Valley and met with all of those different companies just a couple weeks ago because they really are all important partners. Right. Sorry for the unspicy answer.
Yeah, I mean, what we notice is a lot of it's age dependent. So you can just see that different networks resonate with different age groups, and so it depends on what the team or whoever it is, who are they trying to reach,
Right.
And there's ones that work better.
Yeah, I mean, consumers move from one platform to another platform during the course of a transaction or during the course of a day. So if you understand that, then you don't pick favorites. You leverage appropriately.
Right. Yeah, gets back to that age-old question: who's your audience?
I mean, how many people in the audience are using multiple social, platforms and applications?
That's a lot.
Many.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, next question about beacons. So beacons can be used to target mobile ads to nearby customers. Has the NBA used this technology in malls, sports bars, etc., to drive more revenue streams with fans?
We see a lot of potential with beacons, and I think we're at the very early stages where we have several of our teams testing it. We look forward to this technology developing because it does open up both in arena and, as you put, in malls and sports bars, other opportunities for us to engage our fans with content, offers. Off the top of my head, Golden State's a team that does a nice job at this. When you're in their building and you have the Golden State Warriors app, as you walk by their retail store, you get a notification with a message from one of their players that pops up, offers you a discount to go in that store right then. They've had some success with that. So those are the type of ways teams are using it. We're also working to test upgrades. So a fan in the upper level might walk by a beacon and get a notification through Experience or one of our upgrade partners to upgrade their seats tonight. So we see a tremendous amount of potential with this and are optimistic about it.
Just to add to that too, I think what's so interesting is the value you can bring to fans with things like beacons. And it's not unique. In-arena Wi-Fi now gives you some of this as well. But the utility you can offer, how short are the bathroom lines, how short are the concession lines, and the entertainment you can offer really completes the fan experience. But the best part for the team owners is that the data underlies both. And so you have now an even better sense of what people are doing inside your arenas than before, and in partnership with your ticketing partners.
Indeed. Very cool. All right, so what percentage of ticket sales are currently sold by means of social selling? And how do you think this will change over the next 10 years?
It's hard for me to put an exact percentage on it. I'm sorry not to, but I think because the sale process is long. You don't necessarily send an in-mail on LinkedIn and sell that ticket right away. It's an integral part of the sales process, and we see that as, especially in the initial stages, a growing piece of the sales process. So I see it being almost an integral piece in a lot of our, especially sponsorship, premium seats, and as I talked about, group sales. Moving forward, and I think it just makes the process so much more efficient. Instead of cold calling someone who you don't know how to pronounce their name and you're not sure if you're there, if they even work there anymore, it's just so efficient to know who they are. Hopefully, to have a connection with them, and it's a fantastic tool.
And I would just add to that is that what John had mentioned too. I mean, you have so many different attribution. There's so many touches that go into a sale, again, particularly a B2B sale. And so to Amy's point, social selling is just one of, it's like oxygen. I mean, it's like almost every deal you should be using it. Why would you not want to know who else could be involved in a decision? And one way we try to help that with tracking how it impacts is, Amy mentioned LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is a way to integrate. One of the things it does, it integrates in with the CRM, Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics. So right there, you can see how, what percent of your revenue is attributed to some sort of social selling outreach.
There are two stats. And the first one, I'm not sure if it comes from Ipsos or Millward Brown, but 18% of, these third-party research studies that Google commissioned, 18% of all ticket sales start with some sort of digital social interaction. Okay, so that's not taking credit for the final conversion, but there's a start point for about a fifth of sales that starts with some digital social interaction. Second stat is 3/4, and this is I think across all leagues, 3/4 of all attendees of sports events purchase their ticket online. So there was some, there are other things could have happened on the way to that sale, but there's clearly, if there's something that's happening on the way to that sale and it's digitally oriented, social is going to be a component of that. Those stats come from two different studies, but I think you can start to draw some loose connections between those two stats.
Yeah, clearly social selling, a big part of the overall ticket selling process in the future. Next question from the audience, John, this might be a good one for you to address. How should professional sports teams and venues manage the risks and opportunities associated with the secondary ticket market? What learnings can be gathered from other events, for example, rock concerts?
Sure. So there's a lot of layers to that. I think secondary is a very large market, and part of that has been pricing. Has the pricing been efficient or not? And the pricing will never be perfectly efficient for a whole bunch of reasons. On concerts, the artist wants to say, I sold out in 10 minutes, for example, and there's a there's an understandable pride or ego thing to that, but that then just creates a secondary market of people arbitraging around all of that. On sports, you have a season ticket, single ticket dynamic where the season ticket is cheap. The season ticket is a discount, which again creates an arbitrage opportunity around that. So it's not going to go away. It may get a little bit smaller as pricing gets more efficient. So assuming it's here to stay, what becomes very important is understanding who the fan is after the ticket gets transferred. And that's where the value and the power of digital ticketing, so that they're transferring the tickets on their phone. You know who else is in the building. We've been talking a lot about the digital fan, but the average ticket buy is, say, 2 to 4 tickets. So say it's 3 on average. The team often won't know the 2 other people that came into the arena. Right. And so forget the digital fan, just the fan coming in the building, you only know 1/3 around that. And so that's where, with secondary and with transferring of tickets and with mobile entry, you can start to get a much richer view of who all is coming in the building. I've sort of segued around that, but I think the key thing is with secondary or primary, really knowing who that fan is, breaking the data silos so you can understand how you reach them and literally who it is.
Yeah, I would just add to that, the secondary market's extremely important as an ecosystem today. And a big reason for that is we have, in the NBA, over 280,000 season ticket members, and we call them members. It's a kind of a transformation in language there, because our teams see them as true 365-day a year members of their team. But those are our very most important fans, those people. And they need to be able to resell their tickets. And so a combination with our teams becoming more sophisticated with their pricing, and John's exactly right. We sell season tickets a year in advance. It's very hard to price it perfectly, but we want to price our tickets as close as we can according to market demand. And then the third piece is the fan data, and we want to know as much about the fan as possible. And so our teams very much want their fans to be able to resell their tickets on their own sites, and to understand who that fan is, so they can then service them better and retain season ticket members better.
And it gets back to what you were talking about with painting the 360-degree picture of your fans. Next question from the audience. Data on individuals is being aggregated across so many platforms and sources. How are you aggregating this information on an individual level to tell a single narrative about that individual? Any takers?
I can address that a little bit. We have efforts at the league and our teams to create a 360-degree view, like I talked about, of the fan. and it involves data in multiple areas and aggregating them into a single database, and then finding ways to better service them. So one of the things we do at the league for our teams is we use ticket buying data, 10 years of historical ticket buying data. We have all the data on our NBA All Access members. We have all the data on people who buy League Pass broadband, people who buy NBA Store. We're then able to look at that data set, append information about those customers on it, and then feed it back to our teams in order to score leads. Yeah. So we create what we call a FICO score for our teams, so they can prioritize who they call. I shouldn't just say call, or reach out to via LinkedIn. And so we see more and more potential in this type of thing. And then, of course, it's creating different segments of fans. And it's very hard to create fan segmentation at the league level because each market is so different. So we work on a consultative basis with each of our markets. I mentioned Atlanta, who's done a fantastic job. We work with them to help really segment who their season ticket members are today, and going after people who look like them.
Right. Any others? All right, so we have time for one last question, and it's future-oriented, which is very good. Thank you for the audience. How do you think about strategies for engaging younger fans who can form a new lifelong relationship with a particular team or sport? Amy, do you want to lead off? All right.
Giving the person with the voice challenges most questions. I'm going to take a non-digital answer to that. All right. And you heard Adam speak about this yesterday. We see youth basketball as one of our biggest opportunities, and it's engaging kids to actually play basketball. So at our All-Star weekend and throughout the year, in partnership with the Knicks and Nets, we reached 1 million kids in the 5 boroughs in New York City. The Friday of All-Star weekend, we had 20 different clinics going on in each of the 5 boroughs in New York. And it really showed the power of that, of just putting a ball and reaching kids through, and I'm a former basketball player, like, that's how I learned to like the NBA, is I played basketball and I went to NBA games, and that's what got me. And back in the day, I would have then followed them on social media. So I think that is the real opportunity to engage youth, is getting them to play basketball.
So I did look this up this morning just because I thought I might say it. The future is now, and I'm quoting George Allen, a notable sports figure. It's mobile, and we've talked about mobile, but I don't think people really grasp in totality how important mobile is. Not just, and particularly for youth, right? Because there's a generation now that's between 2 and 18 who they're going to live their entire digital lives, for the most part, on something that is in their pocket, okay? And so that if you don't have a strategy for that, for them, for the next 50 years, on top of what you're doing now for selling some tickets and in-game experience, missing the boat, right? I have a 16-year-old son. He and 2 of his buddies were at our house last night having pizza, watching something on Netflix on the screen while checking something on IMDb on their phone, and that phone goes everywhere with them as either the primary part of their daily experience as it relates to entertainment, or the part 1A of their daily experience as it relates to entertainment. And sports is entertainment. So mobile, the future is now.
And I think some great words to end on, potentially, that the future is now. I want to thank our panelists for an outstanding conversation and your insights on the question of how you're using big data to drive revenue within your organizations and for your partners, but also how to deliver, at the end of the day, great experiences for fans as well. So thank you so much for your insights. I also wanted to thank very briefly Jessica Gelman for her vision and leadership in this conference, and Jackie for putting together this panel. And I also want to send a special thanks to Paul Campbell and Danielle Russell and their entire sports analytics team. I have seen you work tirelessly for months to pull this off, and what a remarkable job you all have done. So thank you again to our panelists, and thank you to the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics team.